So recently I saw a story from CBS in the United States, and it was kind of a cheeky story. I got a good chuckle out of it, but there's an important message behind it, and it actually ties in with something that we have been studying as an organization. And so here to talk with me about it today is Dan Haley. He's the president and CEO of the Colorado Oil and Gas Association. Dan, thanks for your time today.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me on.
So I'm just going to recap the story quickly, and if I make any mistakes, please jump in and correct me. But as far as I understand it, towards the end of 2020, a Texas oil and gas company wanted to purchase some jackets from the North Face and have their logo put on it, and that's a service that the North Face does. That, of course, North Face is the huge company that produces outerwear, as well as a lot of equipment in that people use in the outdoors. And the North Face refused the order because they said that working with an oil and gas company didn't really fit with their brand standards. And from that, you guys decided to not criticize them publicly, but actually to thank them by giving them an award, noting that North Face is actually a huge user of oil and gas products. Have I got that right in terms of how this all came about?
Yeah, that's right. When we saw the news that they refused this jacket order, that obviously didn't sit well with anybody in oil and gas. And we decided, what's a proper response to something like that? And it came to us from somebody else who was in industry who said, what if you give them an appreciation award? And so we created our first ever extraordinary customer award that we gave to the North Face and their parent company, VF Corp, for being good consumers of the product that our members work to produce every single day.
And in one of the videos that you had online, I thought it was good because I think there's a real lack of understanding out there in terms of how oil and gas is not just used for the vehicles and getting us from A to B or our flights when we get in an airplane, but all kinds of other products throughout society. And myself, I've been surprised since I moved to Alberta several years ago, which is Canada's oil and gas country, about learning more about these different products that I had no idea that oil and gas was involved in making them. So could you tell us a little bit about some of the products that North Face makes that depend on the oil and gas sector?
Sure. And that's part of the issue is there's a huge disconnect between oil and gas and our everyday lives that people just don't quite understand. They think it's just a fuel, something you put in your car, something you use to heat or cool your home. And that is certainly a vitally important part of what our industry does. But also 80% of a barrel of oil ends up someplace else, ends up in your clothing, in your cell phone, in your computer. So if you look at a company like the North Face, nearly every product they sell on their website is made possible by oil and gas. Nearly all of the jackets, backpacks, gloves, tents, all use petroleum products. About 60% of global fibers are made up of petrochemicals. If you think about a company like North Face, because of the grade and high quality of their jackets, it's something like 90 to 95% of their clothing is made with petrochemicals. So they are copious consumers of oil and natural gas, not just to produce the gear that they sell, but also to transport it across the globe.
And one of the things that I thought was kind of funny that you had pointed out was that not only are the products that North Face makes and sells to the public highly made from oil and gas materials, but also they've recently started to build a hangar, I believe, in Colorado there, so they could have their own private jets to shuttle their executives around. When, of course, I think a lot of people understand that private jets tend to use a lot more oil and gas than commercial airlines, at least in terms of how much is used per person. That doesn't seem to fit with their brand standards, does it? When you have a company that is making those types of decisions while, at the same time telling the oil and gas sector that we can't partner with them.
Right. They the parent company recently relocated to Colorado in 2019, and we have seen stories about how they're building one of the largest private hangars in Colorado for their private jets. And so, again, far be it from me to begrudge anybody how they want to get around the country or get around the world. They want to fly on these jets. That's certainly their decision. But when you do that, you need to understand whether you're flying commercial, chartering a plane, you own a small fleet of airplanes, you need jet fuel to get wherever you're going. And we have the Suncor refinery, a good Canadian company right here in Colorado. So they're most likely providing the fuel that's powering those private jets to get them to their meetings, wherever they're going across the country or across the globe. And so again, if that oil is being produced here and refined here, one nice thing is the North Base representatives can feel good in the fact that that oil is some of the cleanest molecules we believe on the planet that's being produced here in Colorado.
And I would agree. I mean, people can make the decisions they will in terms of how they can get from A to B. And if they decide that private jet's the best route for them, then so be it. But I don't understand how they can also, kind of virtue signal and say, well, hey, we're not going to work with oil and gas companies. I don't think those two decisions work. But I do want to ask you, were there any runner-up companies that you had considered when you were thinking about sort of recognizing the North Face?
Well, there weren't any runner-ups that we were, really thinking about. We've seen other companies like Patagonia make similar statements in the past, and maybe someday they can get an extraordinary customer award as well. But one of the things that we highlighted on our call in a very serious way was how much oil and gas has really helped us survive the pandemic, and all the things that go into healthcare that we don't really think about. And not just healthcare, but I should say in Colorado anyway, we've got a lot of restaurants that have limited capacity because of COVID rules. So they're building these little plastic huts outside of the restaurant, and that plastic comes from oil and gas. They're heating those areas with propane, which begins with natural gas. And if you think about healthcare, it has really helped us survive this pandemic, whether it's the single-use plastic, the IV bags, all of the plastic syringes that have been needed and created to help get the vaccines into arms, the cold storage that's needed to keep the vaccine viable, the transportation to get the vaccine across the country, the plastic that goes into ventilators to keep people alive. There has been, really oil and gas has played a key role in helping us all survive this pandemic. And so we wanted to make sure, again, that we were highlighting that as well, connecting the dots for Coloradans and anybody between a barrel of oil and our lifestyle in the 21st century, which is pretty great. Despite all the challenges that we're living with these days, we live a pretty good lifestyle because of oil and natural gas.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that. We've actually produced a short video as an organization just looking at that very issue, at how the oil and gas sector and all these types of products that you had just mentioned and some others have helped us get through it. I mean, a couple we noted was our cell phones, right? I mean, we're dependent on those to stay connected with family members. The technology that we use, I mean, all that's obviously possible because of oil and gas, the countless plastic components, the computer chips and so forth, how they're shipped to North America from Southeast Asia, typically using giant shipping vessels that run on diesel, which comes from oil and gas. I mean, it's been constant, and we actually have noticed a few municipalities here in Canada where they've put in force bans on single-use plastic bags, and of course they've had to ease those restrictions because many stores, at least at the beginning of COVID-19, have banned those people from bringing in reusable products. They've had to use plastic bags to get through it. So I think it's important for people to have sort of rational discussion about this rather than some of the extremes that we've seen. And that's one of the things I appreciated about what you had raised in your video. I want to ask you about something a little bit more or equally constructive in this discussion. Is what is it that the Colorado oil and gas industry is doing that's, say, environmentally more friendly than what we typically see in other jurisdictions? Maybe you're doing something better than what we see in Canada or some other places around the world. You had noted in your video that you're quite proud of the industry and how they try to produce oil and gas in the most environmentally friendly way possible. What do you think other jurisdictions could learn?
Well, it's something we call the Colorado molecule, and we really do believe, and we've got information on our website at koga.org, that these are some of the cleanest molecules produced on the planet. And I would never suggest that Canada should do exactly what Colorado is doing. Every basin is unique. How we go about developing coal bed methane in southern Colorado, or dry gas on the west slope of Colorado, or oil here in the Denver-Julesburg basin, it's all very different. It's all very different from developing in the oil sands of Canada. But the main objective here is to thoughtfully and responsibly develop your local resources with a high level of environmental protectiveness in mind. So in Colorado, that could include, doesn't always include, but could include tankless production, non-emitting pneumatic controllers, closed loop water reuse systems, electric drilling rigs, quiet frac fleets. We've seen that kind of grow throughout the basins in Colorado, really minimizing our venting and flaring to almost zero. It is the flaring and venting level in Colorado is really negligible. So not every operator can or should do all of these things based on where they're operating, but there are really a menu of options that have been developed by Colorado companies and some of the regulations that we have to comply with here in our state that really give some flexibility to maintain that high level of protectiveness. So again, we talk about the fact that we know that we need this resource for the foreseeable future. There's this thought out there that we can, snap our fingers and go to 100% renewable energy tomorrow, and that's just not true. So we know we need oil and gas. So how do we then produce it at a really high level and meet high standards and understand that we need to protect the environment? If we're not doing that here in this country, then that means, or in Canada, or in North America, that means we're going to be relying on foreign countries that don't protect the environment, that don't have the same labor standards that we have for our energy. We don't want to be in that position anymore. I think energy security is something that's very important to this country, and I think to our entire continent.
Yeah, and that's something that we've heard many times up in Canada too, is people making that point. And I think it's important is that long-term forecasts are saying that we're going to use oil and gas for many, many, many decades to come. In fact, more and more of it. So the approach that I take with this issue is, at the very least, if people maybe they don't want to use it, well, that's their choice. But the reality is the world is going to use it. So do we want those jobs here in Canada, or do we want some other country to produce it? I'm guessing you'd kind of come at the issue kind of from a similar approach, right? You'd rather have the jobs in the United States and depending on foreign oil. But is there anything else that you'd like to add that maybe we haven't talked about yet?
Well, I think one important thing to note with this particular extraordinary customer award is the North Face's parent company, VF Corp, also has a lot of other brands that you will see throughout the oil field. Dickies, Bulwark, Terra, Walls, all these other different companies that are out there that are, footwear, clothing brands that you're going to see employees use in the oil and natural gas industry. So FRs, steel-toed boots, they're really selling industrial grade apparel that's made from oil and gas feedstocks. So it's not just the jackets to keep you warm while you're hiking or going to a Broncos game. These are products that are really important to our industry. So we would really hope that the North Face VF Corp would really embrace it, would be proud of the men and women who use that gear to work to produce the energy that we all need every single day, the energy that they rely on to produce their product, to transport that product, and really embrace it rather than, putting the industry at an arm's length. Really try to find out the commitment to the environment that this industry has and the shared commitment that we all have to the environment. So we would encourage them, rather than to say we don't meet their brand standards, embrace it, embrace what we're trying to do, and embrace the men and women who are producing the energy that they use every single day.
Yeah, I appreciate those comments. I think it's important when we have discussions about the environment to talk about, for it to be rational, to be grounded in the science, to be talking about realistic things that we can do to help the environment. And one of the things I appreciated from the video that I watched from your organization was that it seemed like everyone that was participating talked about how they were outdoor enthusiasts. They love the environment. They had their different hobbies and things that they like to do in their spare time. And I think it's pretty clear that people are not kind of treating the environment carelessly, but your industry there is trying to figure out the best way to produce resources in an environmentally friendly way. And I've actually heard the same thing from here in Canada. A lot of people that are in the industry, they're ranchers on the side. They have their hobbies that they like to do in their spare time, that are, whether it's hiking or mountain climbing, whatever it is, they're very concerned about the environment too. So it's good to hear that we see that same approach down in Colorado. Thanks again for your time. I really appreciate it. And maybe we'll talk to you again next year if you have another award winner.
Sounds great. Thanks so much.
Thanks a lot, Dan.